Hi, I'm Katrina Johnson from New Sky Consulting, and you're watching the CATS channel, supporting young people with disabilities to live their best and their brightest lives. So the bilateral agreement has now been signed for the NDIS, and we're all fully aware of when the scheme hits each of our different regions here in Queensland. So there is no better time to start getting NDIS ready than now. And one of the major decisions and areas of change for families and people with disabilities is around self-management of funds and the different funds options that you have available to you. So in the up and coming series of blogs that I've got for you over the next 6 to 7 weeks, we're going to dive right into self-direction and self-management of funds. And I'm really pleased and honoured and grateful to have what I call a self-management guru with us to guide us through these series of blogs and to talk about self-management, the wonderful Kathy Rees. So thank you so much for joining us, Kathy. So I want to give you a proper introduction about Kathy because she's someone who has been in the disability sector for a very long time. So have I, Kathy, don't worry. And she's had a whole range of different roles and jobs in the sector, but self-management is something that she's quite passionate about and has a lot of personal lived experience around it. So let me read to you a little bit about Kathy Rees. Kathy Rees' introduction to self-directed arrangements actually commenced in 1994 when her daughter, aged 20 at the time, moved into her own home. Working collaboratively with a supportive service provider resulted in the implementation of many innovative methods for addressing staff requirements, while strategies to ensure her daughter enjoyed life as fully as possible remained the first priority. In 2000, Kathy commenced managing her daughter's arrangement without an external provider and continues to do so today. Throughout those years, Kathy has undertaken projects to assist people to consider what is required with the transition between current practices in organisations to those that are more responsive through a range of self-directed and self-managed options. She's also completed a project for the Disability Care Australia's Practical Design Fund, and the project was titled, something I think is very important, it's not just about the support, exploring the ways in which family members and people with disabilities evaluate their self-directed, self-managed arrangements. So as I said, Kathy's very expert in the area of self-management and self-direction, and I'm really pleased to be able to bring this series of blogs to you with her. So thank you for joining me, Kathy. There's so much for us to talk about over the coming weeks, but I think a really good place to start is explaining what the terms self-direction and self-management actually mean. Can you explain that for us?
Well, I think in my experience, self-direction is something that we've been talking about here in Queensland for a long time. And certainly when I was interviewing people throughout Australia, the different states had different terminology for it. So while we're very comfortable in saying self-direction here in Queensland, in other states it's self-managed. And of course now with the NDIA, they've gone down the track of talking about it being self-managed. So self-direction as a term isn't so much used anymore.
Okay.
So with self-managed, from what I can understand of the NDIA, is that it's about people who can manage the responsibilities of their funds more directly. So maybe in conjunction with a service provider, but also it could be that they manage most of it, if not all of their funds themselves.
So there's a range of self-managed options that people can choose from under the NDIS.
Yeah, it's a spectrum, I think. People have got the right to choose what they're comfortable to do, what they want to do, and what they don't want to do.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah.
So is self-management of funds a new thing, a new concept? Because this is something you've actually been doing for quite some time. So how new is this self-management stuff?
Well, I'd say it's not new, and certainly the research indicates that it's been around for probably about 50 years through, in other countries. You said that I made a start on self-direction in 1994, which was true, I did, but we didn't call it that. It didn't have a term. It's only really been in the last maybe 5 years that we've heard that term being used more often here in Queensland, for example.
Yeah.
You know, our sector is one that loves a label, and I think that's what they've done with this to some degree.
Yeah. And I think too that it's been heavily influenced by the whole introduction of the NDIS and that notion of choice and control. How do you think that idea of choice and control as philosophies of the NDIS, how has that contributed to the growth in interest of self-management arrangements?
I think the whole premise of the NDIS is very much about people with disability and family members, and obviously other interested people taking control of their life. And why shouldn't they? You know, it is their life when it's all said and done. I think it's a bit of a reaction, if you like, to mainstream service provision, you know, where people didn't feel that they had the same amount of choice, or their voice wasn't heard in the way that they needed to with the supports that they required. So I think it's come from that place. And a lot of the discussion in the consultation process for the NDIS was really talking about people taking on, you know, the responsibility of managing their own affairs if that's what they choose.
Yeah.
However, I think with the research in recent times is suggesting that there's not a lot of uptake on it. But I think in Australia we have to be showing people and giving people lots of really good examples of how well this works. And it does work really well. I just don't think we've got enough examples out there currently to show lots of other people that it is possible.
Yeah.
You don't have to have anything remarkable. You don't have to have a degree or anything like that behind your name.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
But you can
definitely.
do that.
Yeah. And so it is something under NDIA that families can do.
That's right.
So it's quite achievable.
That's right.
Yeah. And it's available to them.
Yes, it's part of the planning process, but I think it should be very clearly spelt out that in that planning process, people will be, there'll be discussion around people's capability, of course, to take on the responsibilities of managing their arrangement. If it's not all of it, it might be part of it.
And I guess that brings me to the question of, and a question I know that you've raised in your blogs on your website, is the question of can I versus should I? So why do you sometimes say that even if you can doesn't always necessarily mean that you should fully self-manage? What's the difference there, and what do you mean by that?
I believe everybody has the right to make a choice around that, and I think I look back on my experience, and certainly other people that I know who've been self-directing or self-managing for a long time. What I do know to be true is that people don't do this in a vacuum. You know, there's usually some type of support there for them. It might be from a supportive service provider, someone in the service believes in what they're doing, or can see that it would just be simpler if the person managed the affairs themselves. Or there might be other allies or family friends, or, you know, other linkages that help the people to be able to manage. I mean, like you say, I've been doing this for a long time, but I haven't done it all on my own.
No.
It's not humanly possible to do everything on your own.
No.
And I think, so when I'm saying that people can do it, yes, of course you can. If you realise that, you know, you can ask for help, and it doesn't have to be help from within the disability sector. It can be just people that you know in the community. It might be a next door neighbour, you might be your brother's sister-in-law, or, you know, somebody that you know.
Yeah.
Or even if you don't know and they don't know, they can go through their networks and find people who can help. On the other hand, with the should I question, sometimes it's a case of we're not well, you know, at a certain time, or I may not be very proficient with managing money. I might, and I'm saying it's obviously not me, but certainly that question around if I don't understand that there are rules around managing money that is government money that's been allocated to my family member, and if I think it's just about adding the money into my family income, and I'm not, don't need to be accountable for it, then I'd actually have a question about, well, should you do that?
Should they do it? So from what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that self-direction, self-management has been around for quite some time.
Yes,
Maybe
it has.
not called that, but it's definitely been around for quite some time. that there's a growing interest in it because of the introduction of the NDIS and the whole philosophies of choice and control, which is great because we all want to have the control and the ability to make choices about what we think's best in our own lives.
That's right.
So it's a good thing. But you're also then raising the question of, yeah, you can do it, it's available, but that doesn't mean that you should do it or do it all by yourself.
Or do all of it all by yourself.
Do everything. So I really want to, in our next blog, explore that. So the whole notion of what it takes to actually implement a successful self-management arrangement and answering that question of, should I? Okay. And the things to think about. So we'll get together again next week.
Sounds like a plan.
Excellent.
Okay,
Thanks, Kathy.
see you then.
See ya. Figuring this stuff out can be a bit overwhelming. And that's why Kathy and I have developed a little guide and an ebook to help families and people with disabilities navigate their way through this and figure out what kind of self-management fund option might be best for you. So I'm going to include the link to the ebook in the description box below. So go ahead and it's free, download that and get started.